Good afternoon to our viewers in Switzerland and good morning to those connecting from overseas. My name is Tatiana Gaspar. I'm the Managing Director of LATCAM. Thank you for making time to join us for this webinar, which will focus on the main aspects of relevance to the World Trade Organization and what can be expected for Latin America. Our special guest is one of the 4 vice presidents of the WTO, a former Minister of Foreign Trade of Costa Rica and renowned global expert on trade, investment, and economic development. She has an exceptional track record in a variety of international organizations and the public sector. We are delighted and honored to have her with us today. A warm welcome to our webinar, Anabel González.
Hello, and thank you very much for having me. I am delighted to join you and the audience in this conversation.
The adequate preparation of this dialogue requires in-depth knowledge and understanding. So who could be a better sparring partner than our very own expert on trade and Honorary Ambassador of the Chamber, Dr. Philippe Nell. Welcome, Philippe.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. In my turn, it's a great honor and pleasure to welcome you today, Mrs. González, to share your views with our audience on the importance of the WTO for Latin America and on perspectives. Just a few words on WTO for our audience. The World Trade Organization was established in 1995. It is the only global international organization dealing with the rules of trade between nations, and it has many roles. It operates a global system of trade rules. It acts as a forum for negotiating trade agreements. It settles trade disputes between its members, and it supports the needs of developing countries. The primary purpose of the WTO is to open trade for the benefit of all. The WTO has 164 members, representing 98% of world trade, and over 20 countries are seeking to join the WTO. This being said, let me now begin our dialogue with Anabel González. Mrs. González, in your opinion, what were the major achievements of the WTO during the past years?
So thank you very much, Philippe, for that question. I probably would want to focus this achievement on the results of our 12th ministerial conference that took place just a year ago in July last year. You know, we had 100 top trade officials gathering here in Geneva to participate in what we call MC12. Our 12th ministerial conference, which is the most important body of the WTO. And this was the first ministerial conference since 2017 because of the pandemic and different issues. And the backdrop for the discussions was quite complex. If you remember, pandemic, war, supply chain disruptions, a looming food crisis, rising inflation, deepening geopolitical rifts, climate change. So a very difficult backdrop. And against all odds, the MC12 delivered. It delivered concrete and tangible results, which I think confirm that the multilateral trading system can respond to the challenges of today's world and help governments tackle global emergencies, even in the most difficult times. So the results of MC12 pertain to central issues in today's world. To address the pandemic, the most important and contentious part clarifies the scope for governments to limit patent rights to support the geographic diversification of vaccine production capacity. To fight insecurity, members agreed to encourage food insecurity. Members agreed to encourage trade and exempt the World Food Programme's food purchases from export curbs. On digital trade, members committed not to impose customs duties so that video streaming, financial transmissions, and other electronic transmissions can continue to flow freely across borders. And for the first time in the history of the WTO, members reached an agreement that puts environmental sustainability at its core, in this case, to curb harmful fisheries subsidies. So all of this very important and concrete results, but also very important is that ministers at MC12 committed to work towards the reform of the WTO to improve on all of its functions. And this is very relevant, including in the area of dispute settlement system, one of the core functions of the WTO that is not working as originally intended. Now, after MC12, members, what we call WTO members, which are really the governments that are part of the organization, have gone back to work with discussions on many important issues at the multilateral level, but also at the plurilateral level, that is among groups of members that are interested in particular topics, such as investment facilitation, e-commerce, and sustainability issues. So we are all preparing now for our next ministerial conference, which will take place in February next year in Abu Dhabi. It will be what we call NC30.
Okay, thank you very much for this review of the results of the last ministerial conference. Indeed, it was a very, very important event for the WTO after a number of years because of COVID, of not having had the opportunity to hold such a meeting. And it is very important to get a success out of that one. Now, if you take some of the issues dealt with at the ministerial meeting, and if we talk in particular on investment facilitation, on e-commerce, also on environment sustainability, how do you assess their importance and the impact of the work done now in the WTO for Latin America?
So this is a very good question, and I would probably like to address it at two levels. First, at the broader level, the fact that MC12 delivered concrete results contributed to the strengthening of the WTO. And having a strong WTO is very important for Latin American countries because for these countries, a rules-based trading system as opposed to a power-based trading system is very relevant. So that I would say is the first point. Then if you look at each of these areas that you were discussing, they're all very important for Latin America. Take, for instance, the case of fishery subsidies. A number of countries in the region have, important fish stocks in their oceans, and nevertheless, some of these fish stocks have been overly fished, in part because of the subsidies that are provided in different parts of the world, not really in Latin America. So for Latin America to be able, to protect the sustainability of the oceans and the livelihoods of people who depend on fisheries, this agreement is very important. Now, we're also negotiated on investment facilitation, as you rightly mentioned. There are 112 countries that are participating in these negotiations. A great majority of Latin American countries are part of it. And the reason for this is that foreign direct investment is very important for Latin America. And this agreement would help cut red tape, would bring transparency to investment procedures, would facilitate the lives of investors in coming to the region and expanding their operations. So for many Latin American countries, again, this is a critical agreement. So in all the different areas that you can touch upon, really for Latin American countries, having global rules that apply across countries in all of these areas can help make trade more secure, more certain, can help attract investment, can improve conditions of market access, all great points to fostering the trade in the region.
Okay, no, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And I may recall that some years ago, I was involved in the preparation of the Doha round, and we had what we call Singapore issues. And here we had investment, we had competition and transparency in government procurement. So I am very happy to see that investment really is coming back to the forefront, because investment is key to countries, particularly in Latin America, with a great potential. Latin America has 620 million people, and therefore there is a great potential for further investments in all areas. And the fact that there are so many countries joining now the work at the WTO witnesses the importance they derive. And it will be very useful now for some results to come out so that investment can flow, much easier across the borders. So I think Latin America indeed is to benefit. Latin America is to benefit from the areas of fishing too. Indeed, fishing is important for many, many countries, and protecting stocks is essential for a small fisherman living on the coast, as well as for much bigger companies doing fishing. So we really do hope that for the next ministerial conference, these works here can be then translated into decisions that will strengthen trade rules and also the potential of countries. Now, taking a broader view and looking at the WTO and Latin America, where would you see the main benefits of the WTO for Latin America, and which countries would you see benefit most from the WTO?
So I would say the most important benefit of the WTO for Latin America is to provide security and certainty in trade relations by providing a set of rules that governs international trade, as well as a mechanism for sorting out trade concerns. And this is important for the region because this basically means that the WTO can help Latin America cope with a more uncertain economic environment, but also to take advantage of the opportunities offered by the major transformations that the global economy is going through nowadays. Take, for instance, and let me just mention 3 areas of opportunity for the region. First, climate change. Latin America has a huge green comparative advantage, which offers opportunities for many new industries and exports. The region has, for example, some of the greenest electricity grids and least carbon-intensive economies in the world. This means that its products could, in many cases, more easily meet decarbonization standards, for example, and even command a green premium in the global market. And all this could be a magnet for green investment, including the development of clean hydrogen as an alternative energy source and export potential. So again, here, the role of the WTO in establishing rules in this area, it provides an important opportunity for the region. Second, let's take digital transformation. While this trend has been going on for quite some time, we know that it has intensified since the pandemic. The health crisis, as we know, showed how much the work can be done from home and what can be done from home in any part of the world. And by facilitating remote working, digitalization points to the way to increase trade, especially in services such as professional services, education, healthcare, and many others. And this is a great opportunity for many countries in the region with skilled labor and still wage gaps with advanced economies. So the potential of digital trade to facilitate trade, diversify exports, and stimulate employment and innovation is enormous. Exports of digitally supplied services total $3.7 trillion last year. And there's an important opportunity in Latin American countries, if you think about countries like Colombia, Argentina, my own country, Costa Rica, Mexico, and others are already taking advantage of these opportunities. And the third trend that I want to mention is the reconfiguration of value chains as a result of efforts by firms to diversify their production and better manage risks. And in this scenario, geography could play, and I think does play, a role in favor of Latin America, and again could maximize the attractiveness of the region as an investment destination. Of course, the benefits will not be automatic. It would be, those countries that offer an open, transparent, and predictable trade policy framework and an open, transparent, and predictable business environment that can take advantage of these opportunities. But here again, the WTO is negotiating this agreement on investment facilitation. It's developing common rules for the digital economy. It just reached an agreement to cut red tape as regards services domestic regulation. So many areas in which the WTO can help Latin America tackle these new opportunities from the green economy, from participation in value chains, and from digital trade as well.
No, thank you very much for pointing to these elements. Indeed, they are essential, and they show to a very good positioning of Latin America for the coming years in these areas like decarbonization. We talk about putting taxes on products which have too much carbon. And therefore, here Latin America has a pole position, and also on the digital economy. There are already so many companies here, also in Switzerland, having some services done in Latin America for the company in Switzerland, and then in order to be more efficient, and also to have the labor force which is required for that. So this is really booming, and it's important to set up now all the necessary guidelines. Now, there's another area which comes up when we talk about trade. It is regional integration, and in Latin America there are there are several areas of regional integration between countries. We have Mercosur, and we have the Pacific Alliance, and in Central America also there is a common market. And therefore, what synergies do you see? What synergies do you see between these integration schemes and the WTO?
So I think, Philip, that regional and bilateral trade agreements can be part of a broad strategy to increase Latin America's participation in global value chains and in regional value chains as well, but also to revitalize productivity growth in the region. And here I think that the agreements that are deep trade agreements in particular, more than the shallow agreements, can help the region tap into these benefits. And let me, for instance, share some of the opportunities that I see. The first one is that these deep trade agreements can complement the multilateral trading system in delivering reductions in trade cost. And this is very important because trade cost impact disproportionately smaller and medium-sized firms. Larger firms maybe can deal a little bit more with them, but that is not the case for the smaller firms. So reducing trade costs can have a very positive impact on inclusivity in trade. Then I think it's also very important to link the benefits from this reduction in trade cost and the integration at the regional level with transport-related infrastructure. This is an area where, again, investment, improving coordination on infrastructure investment, particularly among neighboring countries, is something that could be of great benefit. And regional trade agreements can play here a role too. Let me also highlight the importance of regional trade agreements for fostering regulatory cooperation and convergence. This is very important because companies really confront sometimes difficulties in facing one set of standards in one country and a different set of standards in other countries. So in the context of regional integration agreements, this is something that allows countries to work together and converge on these regulations, converge on these standards, which again contributes to defragmenting trade and reducing trade costs. So the way I look at this is some of these regional agreements can go deeper than the multilateral trading system. They can also complement the multilateral trading system. They can also bring innovations to the multilateral trading system. And the multilateral trading system can also support this regional integration. One good example is our trade facilitation agreement here in the WTO that basically aims at making it easier to go through customs procedures and coordinate the work of other border agencies. So facilitating trade by implementing the trade facilitation agreement can again spearhead the development of regional value chains in the region. So in a way, I do not really see them as as contradictory, but I see really very complementary initiatives. And I think that for Latin American countries, it's important to continue to pursue both avenues.
Okay, yes, thank you very much. I can very much concur with you, in particular on standards. It's very important to have common standards. And we have seen between Europe and the United States, for instance, a long discussion on standards, where it has been difficult in order to bridge gaps and then to set up some agreements on that. But in Latin America, indeed, based on common culture and proximity, certainly a lot can be done through harmonization or through mutual recognition. Now, in the WTO indeed is what we call a member-driven organization. These are really the members, they are there and they discuss the matters. And the Secretariat offers a lot of support and a lot of expertise. But at the end of the day, the members chair the committees and lead the work. Now, from your experience, how would you assess the role of Latin American countries? Latin America had the former Secretary General was Mr. Azevedo from Brazil. So WTO has been led by Mr. Azevedo for quite a few years. And now, how would you see through the WTO the action of Latin American countries to move it forward?
Philip, I think that Latin America very active participation in the WTO confirms the value that countries in the region see in the system. And this active participation, we can find it both from the perspective of substance, but also from the perspective of participation in the institutional structure of the organization. In terms of substance, you see Latin American countries very active in presenting proposals in the areas of investment facilitation, in the areas of environment, in many areas, be it plastics pollution, be it sustainability, be it fossil fuel subsidies. You see Latin America very active in presenting proposals on e-commerce, on investment facilitation. So in terms of the substantive contribution of the region to the discussions here in the organization, I think it's really top quality. But also very importantly, you see that a lot of Latin American ambassadors and delegates are chairs of committees in the WTO. So right now, for instance, top of my mind, I can think of the ambassador of Ecuador chairing the Committee on Trade and Environment, or the ambassador of the Dominican Republic chairing the Committee on Development. Think also about the ambassador of Costa Rica co-chairing the committee, a group on sustainability, the ambassador of Chile co-chairing the negotiations on investment facilitation. So, I can continue on, and if I go and find the list, I would say probably the region that has the greatest number of chairs relative to its participation in trade. And then again, I think this is a clear reflection of the fact that for many countries in the region, it's not a good thing to have to choose, between one block or another block, or it's not good for them, the fragmentation of the global economy, and it's not good for them to have a power-based trading system. They want to support the rules-based trading system, and the only way to support it is by being an active participant.
No, I think it's very good to hear the active participation of Latin American countries at the WTO. And, in order to be elected as a chairman or a co-chairman of the committee, it means that you are very active. These are the other members that elect you. So this is a reflection of a very active participation, because as you said earlier, there are some significant interests of Latin America for a rule-based system, as you say, and also a system that moves forward. So as my last question for you, we all know there are significant challenges for the WTO, and therefore they are now being prepared and discussed for the next ministerial meeting, which will take place next year. We already discussed climate change and digitalization with what is being done. We discussed a little bit also on trade barriers. Now there are also some new elements coming up, such as gender equality, or such as WTO reforms, how to make committees and the whole structure more operational, because when you have to work with 164 members, it's not that easy to get forward and to deal with all the proposals and then to get some conclusions. So where would you see the challenges up now for up to the next ministerial meeting that are going to be tackled, and where one could expect some results?
So I think you referred to a number of the issues, Philip. So I would say probably one is very important for the WTO to assist countries to tap into new sources of trade growth. And we refer to the opportunity, for instance, of digital trade. So that's a very important one. The second one is I think that the WTO is needed to help resolve problems of the global commons. We talked about climate change, and I think we will continue to see more activity in this front in the WTO. Now, the WTO is also important to help manage and de-escalate trade tensions. And in the current context, this is, of course, very important. And there are a number of topics that require attention in this context, one of them being, for instance, the issue of subsidies. So I foresee a role for the WTO in starting with greater deliberation on, what subsidies are good, which ones are bad, what are the spillovers in other countries, you need to strengthen the rules in that area. So an important conversation in that regard. And last but not least, I also want to say that I think the topic of trade and inclusion is very significant. You referred to trade and gender. We have a group here at the WTO that looks into these issues. But I also think about how trade and the global trading system can support small and medium-sized enterprises. How can it support the participation of least developed countries who are maybe not fully integrated into the global economy? And I think, again, this is a very important challenge in going forward, not only because trade empowers people, and we know that trade has helped to lift many people, over 1 billion people out of poverty. But also, I think because people empower trade in the sense that the more people can be brought to benefit from trade, the greater the legitimacy of the trading system. So from this perspective, working in the area of trade and inclusion, I also expect the next few months, and certainly the ministerial, to continue to delivering in this area.
Okay, yes, the WTO has a great agenda. It's an agenda for the future. Definitely, there are new issues coming up, which must be framed into trade rules. Trade has become much more complex, than it was 50 years ago because of these new developments. But the WTO is there for that. And on disputes, for instance, I just read that now, for instance, the US and India are settling together 6 disputes together. They're on panels, but now they're making a package, and this is very constructive, and this is positive. This shows also the role of the WTO as an organism where you can bring your disputes and then look for solutions with your partners. Now we are coming to the end to our half an hour discussion. Privileged to have you, Anabel González. Would you have a final word for the future of the World Trade System for us?
Well, I want to make the case that the WTO is worth reforming, improving, and modernizing. A WTO that is fit for the 21st century is not just the best insurance policy businesses have against growing policy uncertainty. A strong and reformed WTO is society's best bet to build a more inclusive, sustainable, and resilient global economy. So I want to also thank you very much, Philip and Tatiana, for inviting me to join you here today, and to congratulate you on the great work that the Latin America Chamber of Commerce does here in Switzerland. And I wish you all the best in your endeavors going forward. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Anabel González, for having agreed to be our interview partner today. We know you're running on a very busy, tight schedule, but it has been a great pleasure and honor to meet you, and we appreciate very much your work as well. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Dear viewers,
Bye.
if you have a few more minutes, please stay connected. You may not know, but Philippe Nell spent more than 100 days of meetings in several WTO committees between 1985 and 2019. And I would like to ask you, Philippe, China has become the largest exporter in the world and one of the major trading partners for many countries in Latin America and across the world. You led the Swiss delegation during the 2 last years of the multilateral negotiations of China's accession to the WTO. And China's trade practices raise strong criticism, in particular from the United States. Why was this accession so important for China and the world economy?
Yeah, thank you very much, Tatiana, for this question. Indeed, I led the Swiss delegation in the last 2 years of negotiation. Negotiation lasted 11 years. It was difficult, it was long, and also some of the reason is that from years to years, China had to proceed to reforms. And without these reforms, we could not just move forward and have then China into the WTO. But then we came at a point after 11 years when finally we had a package which enabled us to have China in the WTO. And China's accession to the WTO was very important for China because it meant significant new trade opportunities. Before China's accession, many WTO members had hundreds of anti-dumping duties and quantitative restrictions on Chinese imports. The European Union, for instance, had quotas on toys, on textiles, on clothing, on chemicals, on steel products, and many other products. Now, the dismantling of these restrictions led to an explosion of China's exports. China was ranked number 7 in the world in 2001 on the export side, with 3.9% of world export. Today, China is number 1 and more than 15% of world export. But we have to acknowledge that across the world, in many countries, traditional industries, textiles, clothing, steel, toys, and so on, face very, very fierce competition against Chinese products, and consumers benefited from lower prices. But in addition, China has been moving up the technological ladder into electronics, cars, computers, and so on. But what's important to say is that likewise, China had to open its economy. And China moved from the 8th largest importer in the world in 2001 to the 2nd largest importer today, with about 12% of world import. Latin America benefits significantly from China's large needs in commodities and food. And during the past 20 years, when China was growing 8-9% a year, this was a very, very significant push factor for Latin America in order to grow, because China needed indeed Latin American commodities and food products.
Thank you, Philippe. And can you provide maybe a specific example of China's growth in imports following its WTO accession?
Yes. WTO rules forbid import limitation with quotas, quantitative limitations. So before acceding to the WTO, China had a lot of quantitative restrictions to protect its economy from foreign competition. And for watches, this meant that the Swiss watch industry could export in 2001, before China's accession to the WTO, only for a total amount of 35 million Swiss francs watches to China. Now, after China acceded to the WTO, China had very, very quickly to dismantle this quota. This means that within 4 years of China's accession to the WTO, Swiss exports of watches were multiplied by 10, and in 2010, they reached 1.1 billion Swiss francs, from 35 million to 1.1 billion within 9 years. This is all the more remarkable that watches, upon importing to China, were facing customs duties between 11 and 23%. They were facing a value-added tax of 17%, and all the watches priced above $1,600 were facing a 20% luxury tax. Now, in 2021, Swiss watches export to China reached a peak with 3 billion Swiss francs, facilitated in part also by the Swiss-China Free Trade Agreement of 2014. And, you know, Switzerland on the import side has also been benefiting from China's manufacturing production, in the sense that a number of Swiss watch manufacturers have been buying parts for their watches, such as cases or bracelets and so on, in China, amounting to more than 500 million Swiss francs in the past few years. So this shows you a concrete example of the consequences for one industry in Switzerland, watches, of the accession of China to the WTO. So it's a huge consequence. Had China not become WTO member, then well, it would have kept its quotas on watches, for instance. So you can see here a significant win-win situation, whereby the Swiss industry is winning by exporting more to China, and also where China is also winning by its consumers being able to benefit from these Swiss watches.
Thank you, Philippe. Now, intellectual property and state-owned enterprises were two big issues as China joined the WTO, and they remain big issues. Should the WTO have waited more time to grant access to China?
Yeah, well, I would like to tell you that indeed, in the last year of China's accession to the WTO, the chairman of the what we call Working Party on China's accession, Pierre-Louis Girard from Switzerland, did establish about 9 negotiating groups to deal with specific issues which were very difficult and indeed could not be dealt with 150 members around the table. So myself, I chaired one of these groups on textiles and safeguard measures. But I also took part in other groups, such as intellectual property. And in intellectual property, a text was drafted, which is a text fulfilling fully the rules of the WTO. But as we were moving toward the end, and as we had substantial information on China and on its intellectual property regime, we knew that there would be significant difficulties for China to implement these rules within a short time. So therefore, it was conceived that China would have some time to make the changes that were necessary. It was not enough to have this on paper. A lot of implementation had to be done, in particular, for instance, at the judicial level, at the court level, in order to deal with cases and to take then the appropriate measures, and also to do the appropriate surveillance. But at that time, as I said a few minutes ago, we really felt that it was better to have China in than to keep China out, the WTO, knowing very well that in some areas, such as intellectual property, which means patents, respect of patent, respect of copyright, and technology transfer. Now, we talked a lot about forced technology transfer. In the US, there is a commission on intellectual property, which just came up saying that the US was incurring a yearly loss of $600 billion because of intellectual property violations by China. So it can be very, very, very significant. And this is why also the US is presently and has been under President Trump putting so much pressure on China, and had asked China for a first trade agreement, which had been signed, and in which there is an important intellectual property chapter where China had to take some measures in order to improve its regime. So this is all work in progress. But what we see now at the world level is a certain discontent with the way that these matters are dealt with in China, because now it's 22 years that China is WTO member, and we would have expected that by now its regime would be fully compliant. However, it's not yet the case, and therefore a lot of work remains to be done on state-owned enterprises. Also, there was the expectation this could not be changed overnight, because these were very large companies with thousands of people, which had their job and their lodging and school for the children. Everything was included into the factory. So this can't be changed overnight. But as of now, we would have expected that there would be a different frame for these state-owned enterprise, many of them not being profitable. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Now, the WTO registered recently 339 regional agreements on trade in goods or services, several of them from Latin American countries. Do regional agreements reinforce or weaken the WTO?
Yeah, that's a good question. Anabel González addressed it already before under certain aspects. What I would like to say here to outline is that the WTO and its predecessor, the GATT, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, they provide an exception to the most favored nation clause to regional agreements. So overall in the WTO, you should treat every partner the same way, every partner. If you give a reduction of tariff of 5% to one member, you give it to everybody. However, the GATT already and the WTO also accepted an exception for regional agreements, which are also called free trade agreements, common market, or customs unions. Why? Because they pursue the same objective as the WTO, the GATT before. They open up trade and they strengthen rules. And this is also what came up from Anabel a few minutes ago. They come up to common standards, they develop supply chains and so on. And the fact that these customs union or free trade areas at the end of the day can be well accepted under World Trade rules is because the objective of World Trade rules is indeed to bring barriers down, to eliminate trade barriers. And the customs union, free trade zone, what they do it quicker. They do it quicker than the WTO can do. Maybe not in all cases. Take pharmaceuticals, for instance. In the negotiation of the Doha round, it was decided to put at zero all customs duties on pharmaceuticals in the industrialized countries in particular. And therefore that's it, we reached zero. So any pharmaceutical imported in Switzerland from anywhere in the world is going to get no customs duty. The same in the US, in a number of other countries. And we could reach this decision among the major producers, OECD countries and industrialized countries, because it is quite clear that pharmaceutical is linked to health. And therefore, if you can do something in order to limit health costs, and you should do it. And in that respect, there should be no protection on that. And this was achieved. We've done it for pharmaceuticals. Now, could we do it for other products? Which we have to remain to be seen. But for pharmaceuticals, each time we negotiate Switzerland a free trade agreement, well, there is nothing to negotiate pharmaceuticals on our side, because our partner, free trade partner, has already free access to our markets. And also, what we have seen, really, the interdependence between the WTO and regional agreements is that the WTO serves as a basis for provisions in regional agreements. For instance, if you take a free trade agreement of Switzerland with a partner, what you will see is that you will have a chapter on intellectual property, on technical barriers to trade, on government procurement, on trade facilitation, and which will be based on the WTO agreements. And what they will do, they will go a bit farther. So here you see the very good synergies and interdependence between WTO and free trade agreements, where we take back, we refer to WTO provisions, and we go one step further. And if not, then we refer to the full agreement of the WTO. Therefore, we further confirm commitments in the WTO. And in some areas, such as subsidies, state aids, customs valuation, there we refer simply to the WTO agreements. So I should say that the WTO is the backbone of regional agreements. All of them also are reviewed in the WTO Committee on Regional Trade Agreements. These reviews are very thorough, based on excellent analytical documents. Now, there is a downside. There's always a downside to something. And the downside of these regional agreements is that if you are not a member of that agreement, then you will face a competitive disadvantage. You may call it also discrimination. And this really can't be avoided. This can also be a stimulus for further negotiations. In 1958, when the European Common Market was established with the 6 first countries, Italy, France, Germany, and also Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands, then the United States were confronted to a very big market in Europe and with significantly high customs duties, while these countries had no customs duties between them. So the US were put at a complete disadvantage. So this was one of the reasons for President Kennedy to launch what was called the Kennedy Round, and the full round of negotiations to decrease, in particular, customs duties, and also to address other trade issues. So once you have one of these big, groups being set up, it can also be an engine for further tariff and tariff liberalization. We would say also, 90 years ago, we were, the US and the European Union under President Obama spent about 2 years to prepare and to negotiate what would have been a free trade agreement. And they came up with a paper, very comprehensive, which really set up the guidelines to do it. But then when they entered into negotiations, finally, they never ended up. There were some issues which just could not be solved between them. But what we were telling around is that if the EU and the US have done such an agreement, then the other countries, important traders from the US or the EU, would really have had to also do likewise the same agreement with them, or otherwise you would have to find a way in the WTO to reach a level playing field.
Thank you, Philippe. I think we have reached pretty much the end. One last word. How do you see the future of the WTO?
Well, I think I would say that the WTO is all the more necessary in today's world to remind members of their obligations and to deal with trade disputes. I talked about India and the US a few minutes ago, to interpret rules and to support developing countries with open markets and seek further liberalization. The WTO will continue to make substantial contributions to trade rules, taking in particular with what are being called new areas right now, such as digitalization, such as environmental, gender issues, and also labor issues, which are coming more and more at the forefront. And finally, in my opinion, it is of utmost importance to deal with these topics in a coherent way. And the WTO is the best forum to tackle them for the future, that is, in a multilateral forum. So thank you very much, Tatiana.
Thank you, Philippe, for providing these additional, very valuable and important insights, and also for preparing the dialogue before with Anabel González. It has been a pleasure as always. Dear viewers, thank you for having joined us today. I hope you found it equally compelling and interesting. The webinar recording will be posted on our YouTube channel, LATCAM Switzerland, latest by tomorrow. So if anyone could not join, you can tell them that's where they can find the recording. I hope you can join us again soon on the next occasion. I wish you a wonderful summer. Till then, all the best and goodbye.